Hello there everybody and welcome to my first ever Star Wars movies and TV complete chronological timeline. I hope this helps you all for those of you who are interested in just getting into the Star Wars franchise and checking out all that it has to offer in movies and TV. Without further ado, let's just get started. The Star Wars movie and TV timeline begins currently with the High Republic era. The High Republic is a predominantly book and comic book era, but there have been some TV shows that have connected. It is also a purely Star Wars canon era. For those of you not familiar with the terms Star Wars canon or Star Wars Legends, we have to look back at 2012 when Disney acquired Lucasfilm. After the Disney purchase of Lucasfilm, the next couple years saw the final stories that were already in development under George Lucas release before a complete reset of the Star Wars timeline in 2014. Beginning with the novel A New Dawn, everything that Disney released post A New Dawn in 2014 became Star Wars canon, and everything that was released prior to A New Dawn in 2014 was Star Wars Legends. There are a handful of exceptions, however. Of course, the main exception are the original 6 Star Wars films from George Lucas, as well as the Star Wars The Clone Wars 3D animated TV series, which at the time only featured 6 seasons. Not pertinent to this list, but the only other thing that is both Star Wars Legends and Star Wars canon is the comic book miniseries Darth Maul, Son of Dathomir. Getting back to the timeline, that means the High Republic era is a purely Disney canon era. If you were interested in the TV shows of the High Republic, currently you would start with Young Jedi Adventures, which takes place in 232 BBY. The Young Jedi Adventures is a Disney Plus TV series and mostly focuses on a cast of young Jedi characters as they go on fun missions, learn to hone their Jedi skills with Yoda, and fight a variety of enemies. You would then jump 100 years later to the very end of the High Republic era, which is going to be led by the live-action TV series, The Acolyte. The Acolyte is showrun by Leslie Headland and focuses on the emergence of dark side powers in the final days of the High Republic. Then you would jump to the Fall of the Jedi era, which in Star Wars canon is the name given to basically just the prequel era. If you were watching this in chronological order, that means you would start with Tales of the Jedi, Season 1, Episode 2, Justice. Justice follows Count Dooku and his apprentice Qui-Gon Jinn. We don't know the exact time that this episode takes place, but it's somewhere between 68 and 58 BBY. That would then take you to Season 1, Episode 3 of Tales of the Jedi, Choices. While investigating the death of a Jedi Council member, Dooku and Mace Windu travel to the planet Raxus Secundus and uncover a mysterious plot that will set Dooku's path in the future. We also don't know the exact timeline of this episode, but it can be safely said that it takes place sometime between 50 and 42 BBY. You will then backtrack a bit to watch Season 1, Episode 1 of Tales of the Jedi, this one titled Life and Death. This episode sees baby Ahsoka discover her Force powers and connect to the creatures around her home planet. This episode begins in 36 BBY and carries all the way to 35 BBY. That would take us to our first Star Wars film on the timeline, and that film is none other than Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, which is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. The Phantom Menace was written and directed by George Lucas and takes place in 32 BBY, where Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn and his apprentice Obi-Wan Kenobi attempt to uncover the mysteries around a trade blockade of the planet Naboo. This eventually leads them to run into a young slave named Anakin Skywalker, which sets forth the entire Star Wars saga. After that, you can watch the collection of animated shorts known as Star Wars Galaxy of Adventures. I would caution you watching that here though, as this will spoil basically everything else in the timeline. If you are brand new to Star Wars and you are just looking to watch this for the first time, I'd skip this and maybe come back to it at the end. The reason it's here on the timeline is because it does roughly adapt moments from the films and TV shows, beginning with The Phantom Menace and carrying all the way through the final Star Wars film, Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. After that, you would then watch The Sith Lord. This is the final episode of Tales of the Jedi that features Count Dooku. This episode does begin during The Phantom Menace, but most of it takes place shortly after. Next up would be the series of animated shorts known as Star Wars Forces of Destiny. I'm not going to outline the exact watching order of Forces of Destiny here. If you would like to see an expanded TV show only timeline where I talk about every episode of every show and what order to watch it in, let me know in the comments. But similarly to Galaxy of Adventures, Forces of Destiny ties in heavily with the Star Wars films and TV shows. It's a series of animated shorts focusing on the women of Star Wars and some of their smaller side adventures before, during, and after the films. We would then jump about 10 years to 22 BBY, where we would watch Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. As I mentioned earlier, Attack of the Clones is Legends and canon, and tells the story of now a late teenage Anakin Skywalker who has been trained in the ways of the Jedi by Obi-Wan Kenobi. But with the looming threat of war with the Separatists and an assassination plot against Padme Amidala, the Jedi are forced to make difficult choices that will change the galaxy forever. Attack of the Clones was directed by George Lucas, with a screenplay by both Jonathan Hales and George Lucas, and a story by George Lucas. That would then take you to the Star Wars Clone Wars TV series. Be careful not to confuse Star Wars Clone Wars with Star Wars The Clone Wars. Star Wars Clone Wars was technically labeled a micro-series and released from 2003 to 2005. Show run by Genndy Tartakovsky, the creator behind shows like Samurai Jack. Star Wars Clone Wars gave you a bite-sized look at different conflicts from the titular war, as well as bridging the gap between Episode 2 and eventually Episode 3. Before we move on to the next graphic, please hit that like button. It helps me out so much with the YouTube algorithm, and subscribe to the channel for more great content just like this. Alright, let's move on now to the next graphic. So that does take us to the next entry on our timeline, which is the 21 BBY Star Wars The Clone Wars film. Star Wars The Clone Wars was directed by Dave Filoni, with a script by Henry Gilroy, Scott Murphy, and Stephen Melching. The film sees the Jedi attempt to gain favor with Jabba the Hutt during the Clone Wars, as they scour the galaxy in search for Jabba's son, Rhoda the Hutt. This film is considered canon and Legends, and I did place it ahead of the Star Wars The Clone Wars TV series because this is the thing that basically introduces the entire era. Although there are a couple episodes of the Star Wars The Clone Wars TV series that take place ahead of this film, I do think it is essential to have watched this film before you get into the Clone Wars TV show, which would then next take us to the Clone Wars TV show on the timeline. The Clone Wars seasons 1 through 6 are considered both Star Wars canon and Star Wars Legends, spanning the years of 22 to 20 BBY. The Clone Wars told the story of a variety of different characters, from our big three like Obi-Wan, Padme, and Anakin, to new characters like Ahsoka Tano and Captain Rex, as well as legendary Jedi Masters like Mace Windu, Yoda, Kit Fisto, Plo Koon, Shaak Ti, and more. During the events of the Clone Wars, you would next watch Season 1, Episode 5 of Tales of the Jedi, Practice Makes Perfect. Practice Makes Perfect is a montage episode, beginning in 21 BBY and carrying all the way to 19 BBY, focused on Ahsoka's training against blaster-firing clones. Although this episode does begin in 21 BBY, I would highly recommend saving this to watch after you watch the final season of the Clone Wars, which is the next entry on our list. I left Season 7 of the Clone Wars as a separate entry, purely just because it is not Legends. It does also tie in directly during Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, which is the next entry on the list. Revenge of the Sith is both Star Wars canon and Star Wars Legends, and was written and directed by George Lucas. The Revenge of the Sith sees the Jedi begin to fall as we transition from the Republic to the Galactic Empire. This would then take you into the Dark Times era. The Dark Times era is the 19-year stretch between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, and this era would begin with the canon show Star Wars The Bad Batch. Bad Batch follows an A-Team style elite clone task force known as Clone Force 99, as the clones struggle with their place in the galaxy post the transition of the Republic to the Empire. After that, you would watch the final episode of Tales of the Jedi, Season 1, Episode 6, Resolve. This episode sees Ahsoka Tano attempting to survive on her own after the events of Order 66. Next up on the timeline, I'm just throwing in there Tales of the Empire. As of the recording of this video, even though you are watching this video on May the 4th, Tales of the Empire has not yet released. That does make it difficult to place here on the timeline, and most likely I will be wrong. We have seen some shots from the trailer that show Morgan Elsbeth fighting General Grievous, which we can assume is a similar time period to when General Grievous originally raids Dathomir in the Clone Wars, which takes place as early as 20 BBY, and we have also seen a Morgan Elsbeth that looks about the age we see her in The Mandalorian, which is in 9 ABY. BBY, so take this placement with a grain of salt, and for next year's update I will have the exact placements. After that you get into the 15 BBY series, Droids. Droids was an animated television series that ran from 1985 to 1986, featuring 13 episodes and a TV movie. It followed the adventures of R2-D2 and C-3PO, who often find themselves in the company of new masters and in new dangerous and difficult situations. After that, you would move to the canon-only film Solo: A Star Wars Story. Solo: A Star Wars Story has a prologue that begins in 13 BBY, but mostly takes place in 10 BBY. As you might imagine, Solo is about the origin story of Han as he transitions from Scrum Rat on Corellia to one of the galaxy's most infamous smugglers. Then you would move into the canon-only show Obi-Wan Kenobi, which takes place in 9 BBY. Obi-Wan Kenobi sees the titular character broken after the events of Revenge of the Sith, but one final mission protecting somebody that's important to him brings him out of his solitude and back into the galaxy at large, where he must face the harsh consequences of his actions from Revenge of the Sith. Moving on to the next graphic here, we have the last few Dark Times era pieces of Star Wars film and TV, beginning with Season 1 of Andor. Andor is a canon-only show that follows the character Cassian Andor, who first appeared in Rogue One: A Star Wars Story. The series as a whole is a more grounded perspective about the growing resentment from the people towards the Galactic Empire as the rebellion begins to emerge. There is a Season 2 of Andor coming out either later this year or in 2025. We don't know the exact times that they take place. However, since Cassian does appear in Rogue One: A Star Wars Story, it is said that Season 2 takes place across 4 different arcs of 3 episodes, each spanning a year in time between 5 BBY and 0 BBY. Next, you would jump to the Star Wars Rebels shorts, which all take place in 5 BBY and give us a glimpse at what each character from Star Wars Rebels was doing prior to the show beginning. That would then take you to the canon-only Star Wars TV series Star Wars Rebels, which follows a ragtag group of rebels as they go from small insurgent group to being some of the most prominent symbols of the Rebel Alliance. This show takes place from 5 to 1 BBY and was showrun by Dave Filoni. And then our final piece of the Dark Times era is Rogue One: A Star Wars Story, the 2016 film directed by Gareth Edwards and written by Chris Weitz and Tony Gilroy, with a story from John Knoll and Gary Whitta. Rogue One tells the story about how the Rebel Alliance comes into possession of the plans of the Death Star, as seen in the original Star Wars film Episode 4. That would then take us to the Age of Rebellion, which begins with Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope, originally just titled Star Wars. It was both written and directed by George Lucas and began the entire Star Wars saga. The film follows farm boy Luke Skywalker as he joins forces with a Jedi Knight, a cocky pilot, a Wookiee, and 2 droids to save the galaxy from the Empire's world-destroying battle station, the Death Star, while also attempting to rescue Princess Leia from the mysterious Darth Vader. You go from the original Star Wars film to the second ever Star Wars film or TV series with the TV movie The Star Wars Holiday Special. The Star Wars Holiday Special sees Chewbacca and Han Solo try to get to the Wookiee homeworld of Kashyyyk to celebrate Life Day. In the meantime, Chewbacca's family passes the time waiting for him with various forms of entertainment. The Holiday Special is the one thing on this list that you will not find on Disney+, but you can find on YouTube for free. After that, you would jump 2 more years into the future to 3 ABY to watch the film Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. The Empire Strikes Back is once again both canon and legends, and was directed by Irving Kershner and written by Lee Brackett, Lawrence Kasdan, and George Lucas. The Empire Strikes Back follows the Rebel Alliance after they are overpowered by the Empire. Luke Skywalker then begins his Jedi training with Jedi Master Yoda, while his friends are pursued across the galaxy by Darth Vader and the bounty hunter Boba Fett. In the year between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, you would next watch the TV cartoon Star Wars Ewoks. Ewoks span 2 seasons from 1985 to 1987 and follows the young Ewok Wicket and his Ewok friends as they have fantastic adventures across the forest moon of Endor. Next up would be the Legends only TV film in 3 ABY, taking place shortly after the Ewoks TV series, Caravan of Courage, an Ewok Adventure, or more recently just called The Ewok Adventure. The TV film follows Wicket the Ewok and his friends as they agree to help 2 shipwrecked human children, Mace and Sindel, on a quest to find their parents. After that, you would watch the follow-up to Caravan of Courage, Ewoks: The Battle for Endor, which also takes place in 3 ABY. The Battle for Endor follows a group of marauders as they raid the Ewok village and steal a power supply they believe to be magical. Moving forward 1 more year, you have the canon and legend Star Wars film, Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, written by Lawrence Kasdan and George Lucas, and directed by Richard Marquand. Return of the Jedi sees our rebel heroes attempt to rescue Han Solo from Jabba the Hutt as the Rebel Alliance tries to destroy the second Death Star, while Luke struggles to help Darth Vader turn back from the dark side. Moving on to the final graphic here, this is entirely made of Star Wars canon material. We'd begin with the New Republic era, starting with the 9 ABY TV series The Mandalorian. Since this is a chronological watching order, I did place The Mandalorian Season 1 and Season 2 here before you watch the Book of Boba Fett. The Mandalorian was created by Jon Favreau and follows the travels of a lone bounty hunter, Din Djarin, in the outer reaches of the galaxy, who after uncovering a young foundling named Grogu, embarks on a variety of missions that intertwines him in some of the galaxy's most dangerous conflicts. As I said, Season 1 and 2 takes place before you would watch the Book of Boba Fett, which as of now is a single season TV series created by Jon Favreau. In this series, bounty hunter Boba Fett and mercenary Fennec Shand navigate the underworld when they return to Tatooine to claim Jabba the Hutt's old turf. Then you would watch The Mandalorian Season 3 before moving on to the series Ahsoka, created by Dave Filoni. The series is set after the fall of the Galactic Empire, where former Jedi Ahsoka Tano investigates an emerging threat to a vulnerable galaxy. And then that takes us to the unreleased series Skeleton Crew, which is said to also tie into the events of The Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, and Ahsoka, and was created by Christopher Ford and John Watts. Skeleton Crew follows 4 kids as they make a mysterious discovery on their home planet that leads them to get lost in a strange and dangerous galaxy. And then finally, we have the Mandalorian film, The Mandalorian and Grogu. We really know nothing about this film other than it will be directed by Jon Favreau and follows once lone bounty hunter Din Djarin and his apprentice Grogu as they embark on an exciting Star Wars adventure. This film won't release until 2026, but since it's one of the next pieces of the New Republic era, I felt like I should just put it on the timeline. So that takes us to the final era of Star Wars movies and TV, which is the sequel trilogy era known as the Rise of the First Order era. This begins with the animated TV series Star Wars Resistance, which ran from 2018 to 2020. Resistance begins before the events of Episode 7, but carries over through the events of the film and after in its second season. Resistance follows protagonist Kazuto Xiono, who is tasked with a top-secret mission to investigate the First Order. The series was created by Carrie Beck, Dave Filoni, and Kiri Hart, which then takes us to the 34 ABY film Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. The Force Awakens was directed by J.J. Abrams and was written by Lawrence Kasdan, J.J. Abrams, and Michael Arndt. The film sees a new threat to the galaxy rise as Rey, a desert scavenger, and Finn, an ex-stormtrooper, join forces with Han Solo and Chewbacca to search for the one hope of restoring peace: Luke Skywalker. Then you would watch Resistance Season 2 before watching Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. Slight spoiler, Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi takes place immediately after the events of The Force Awakens. The Last Jedi follows Rey as she develops her abilities with the help of Luke Skywalker, as the Resistance prepares for battle against the First Order. The Last Jedi was written and directed by Rian Johnson, which then takes us to our final piece of Star Wars movies and TV, and that is Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. Directed by J.J. Abrams and written by Chris Terrio, J.J. Abrams, and Derek Connolly. The Rise of Skywalker takes place 1 year after the events of The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, and sees the surviving Resistance face the First Order once again and the conclusion of the Skywalker saga. And there you have it. That is the complete Star Wars movies and TV timeline. Hopefully that helped you out if you are new to Star Wars for planning out your future on how you would like to tackle watching this massive franchise. Let me know if it helped you in the comments below, and make sure you like the video. That helps me out so much. And subscribe for more. I have Star Wars timelines covering nearly every single topic of Star Wars. Stay tuned for more great Star Wars content from this channel, as well as content in a variety of other pop culture franchises. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you all next time. May the 4th be with you all.